follow the Constitution. They would follow what he wanted done. History repeats itself, folks. It's over and over again. And he did all this stuff. But he saw there was going to be one obstacle. The English people were armed. So he decided, using his royal prerogatives, that English people could only have guns for hunting and sporting purposes only. This is nothing new. And so he decided that he was going to do this while the English people said, no way, you've gone too far. We are not going to put up with this. And they had what was called a bloodless revolution. And what happened is the army deserted him. No one was supporting him. He found himself all alone. And so he fled London dressed as a woman and made his way eventually over to France, where he stayed and tried to come back several times, but eventually just never succeeded, and he died over there. But the point is, they brought over from Holland William and Mary. William, who was the Prince of Orange and the leader of Holland, they brought him over to become the new king of England. While you're at Williams and Mary's College, it's named after them. Williams, Virginia, is named after William. So they brought him over, but they had a concern. Now remember, as I said, the so-called revolutions of Holland, England, and America are all the same. So you have the Holland, the Dutch, and the English connection again going on here. So what ended up happening is they didn't want this king to go off the deep end, because they really didn't know. They thought they could trust him, but they weren't sure. So they had him sign something called the Declaration of Rights. Now, this is in 1689. Yeah, approximately 100 years before the American Constitution. Now, the Declaration of Rights. I always ask this question, and some of you may have heard me speak before. What was it? Okay, there was between Lexington and Concord and the Declaration of Independence, there was 14 months of conflict, including Bunker Hill, or Breed's Hill, however you want to do it, but including Bunker Hill. There was people dying on both sides. British soldiers and colonial troops dying and killing each other. What were they fighting for? Because in those 14 months, the colonists were not fighting for independence. Actually, independence came up 3 times in the Continental Congress, and they voted it down each time. So what were they fighting for? Anybody? Yeah, they were fighting for the rights as Englishmen. Well, why should they think they had rights? See, we don't take this for granted today. Of course they had rights. No. No one else in the world had rights. A Frenchman had no rights. A Chinese person had no rights. A Spaniard had no rights. But an Englishman had rights. And it was the Declaration of Rights of 1689. And they put in there a lot of stuff that we think is unique to our Bill of Rights. Trial by jury of your peers. No forfeiture without due process. And the right to bear arms. 100 years before our Bill of Rights. And so this is what they had to build on. Now what is interesting about this is these documents, the Declaration of Rights of 1689, became the template for our Constitution. They became a template for our Declaration of Rights, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and our Bill of Rights. See, what is interesting here, and I know sometimes I get pushback, because even as I was reading Facebook, there's this, I read this myth that somehow the framers and the writers of the Constitution and the Continental Congress and the Founding Fathers got together in this room, a bolt of lightning hit them, and they all came out and came up with this marvelous system. No, it took 1,700 years to develop this system. And the United States and the documents that it is founded on is the ultimate product of that system. And so today, though, what are we doing? We're throwing it away. 1,700 years of sacrifice to get there, a struggle against and I call them the aristocrats. And this is why history is so important. See, because we learn that, because they control the language. When we hear aristocrats, who do we think of? We think of like somehow it's connected to nobility, it's connected to a monarchy, it's connected to the landed gentry. It's an old term. But in 1789, a British political philosopher named William Young, he put it simply: an aristocracy is when one group of people makes laws for everybody else but exempts themselves. That is an aristocracy. Simple. So this is the struggle of common man against the aristocracy. It's the aristocrats always trying to suppress, control, and exploit the common people. Socialism is the same way. It exploits the common people. They think they're getting something, but it's just a modern form, what is called benevolent absolutism, which basically the king said, okay, we don't want any revolution, so we'll give people just enough to keep them satisfied. This came out of Germany. This came out of Bismarck, was one of the ones who designed this system, an authoritarian. Okay, so we have this system that we inherited. Now recently I saw an article, and I don't know how accurate it is. It says that 40% of Republicans no longer believe in the Constitution. They have bought into this idea that we now live in a post-Constitution age. This is something that the academics come up, and they always come up with these marvelous ideas that really sound great on the surface, but are just fall apart in practice. And this is the idea that society has progressed to the point that we no longer need documents to tell the relationship between the people and the government. 40% of Republicans, if this is accurate, and it was put out by Dennis Prager, so I'm assuming it's somewhat accurate, 40% of Republicans have bought into this idea that the Constitution that we grew up under is no longer relevant. Now, if that is true, if that is happening today, then we are in trouble, because that is the only thing that kept this country from becoming, now let me back up a bit, Britain, Canada, Australia, we have from New Zealand, Trevor from New Zealand. Isn't it amazing? None of those countries have ever had a Hitler. They've never had a Mussolini, a Napoleon, a Franco like Spain. But yet, and yet, I mean, these countries, Britain, the current government goes back to 1688. It hasn't changed. The American system, 240 years old. So these are new systems. And isn't it amazing that someone like George Washington, who could have been a king, did his term and walked away? But look at Latin America. If you look at their history, as soon as someone could, I promise I'm going to be a democratic leader and I'm going to respect the people and respect the law, he gets in there, what is he? He's a dictator. It's a system of laws. It's a system, it's the values of the culture. And so now we have this and we're throwing it away. This is what kept, like you all familiar with the left-right paradigm, right? And they always have conservatism on the right, and it's with fascism. It's with Nazism. And I used to think, how is it that a party, people who believe in limited government and individual rights could eventually lead into Nazism? How can that be possible? It can't, as long as they believe in the Constitution and the values that it represents. But as soon as we walk away from the Constitution and those values, then we truly become just another right-wing party, just like France has. And then there is no struggle against limiting the power of government. It now turns into who controls the power of government. That's a difference between the American Revolution, the English Revolution, and the revolution in France and Russia. They could never repeat what we have because they were all about who controlled the power of government. There was no struggle to limit the government. It was like, hey, no, we want it, and we're going to expand the government our way. And then the next side comes in, and no, we're expanding it our way. It's just constant growth. So this is why it's important. We cannot abandon the Constitution. We need to hold that. And this is why Doug's work in the Constitution Association is so important. And this is why what we need to do, really, this is a turning point for our country. This election is more important than any election ever. And it's not, and we have, people have issues with both candidates. I have some issues because I am very concerned about the Constitution. But the thing is, we need to get past the party. What we need to do is, once again, now we had people that were veterans, and I was a veteran, and that are serving public office. What do you swear to when you take the oath of office? You swear to defend the Constitution. We need to get back to that. The Constitution has to be number one in our hearts and our minds. And I warn you, and I plead, please, doesn't matter if it's an R or a D behind the president. If he or she is not upholding the principles of the Constitution, even if we like what he is doing, we have to hold him accountable. Because if not, we would get right-wing conservative policies. But we will sacrifice the Constitution to do it. And the future will be very grim. The sacrifices over the 1700 years to get to this point in humankind will be lost. We have to be able to hold these people accountable. And there are a lot of groups, and when I speak and I talk to Tea Party groups, this is going to be an opportunity. If we have Donald Trump in there, and he is, and I'm not making any judgment, I don't know what the future holds. All I'm saying, but he's doing things. He's using executive orders, and he's doing things outside of his constitutional power. We need to stand up and say, wait a minute, we like what you're doing, we want that to be done too, but it has to be within the constitutional limits of your office. And if it can't get done, and you cannot use your bully pulpit and stuff to get this done in a proper way, then it might not be done. But it has to be done in the Constitution. And this is why it's so important to support the work, because how many people even know the Constitution anymore? It's not taught. It's not taught in school. It's not taught in anywhere. So we need to reacquaint ourselves. And that's why I love what Doug does with his classes and his with the Constitution Association getting out there. And I would like to just finish with a quote from Thomas Jefferson. They were having the Declaration of Independence. They were debating back and forth that day. But one of the big concerns was what type of government is going to replace the British Empire. See, now we look back at history and think, well, it was obvious. No, it wasn't obvious. These people were concerned. Not only that, once they removed the protection of the British Empire, you had the French and the Spanish ready to step in and conquer and divide up the colonies themselves. So they stood up and they were debating, well, what are we going to do? I mean, isn't it better to be in the British Empire with reduced rights than it is to be in the Spanish or French Empire with no rights? So this was a big concern, and Jefferson stood up and he said, shouldn't we return to the rights of our ancestors? The Anglo-Saxon form of government, which is the greatest ever created by the wit of man. And when he said that, he didn't have to explain it to anybody. They knew exactly what he was talking about. And I detail that in Liberty and Prosperity. So if you're interested, I do have books here. But please, support Doug and the Constitution Association, because this is essential. We cannot let this vision of a post-constitutional society, this nightmare, come true. Otherwise, our children are going to be into a modern form of serfdom. That's all they're going to be. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. You know, John's been a friend and a colleague, and he's done a fantastic job at what he does. And often we wind up as a 1-2 punch, because chronologically in speech is about where he leaves off, is usually about where I pick up. Real quick, as I get the next video prepared, there was we have dessert that's now available. So if anybody wants to get their dessert, the cake is on the counter. So, you know, I know you had all that food there. It was all there. Now, didn't RJ's do a great job? Wasn't that fantastic? And I'm just happy because RJ's here, because I want him to see, we have a meeting at RJ's once a week, and all he knows is I show up and eat. That's all he knows about me. So he's actually seeing me in action other than just eating at RJ's. Anyway, if anybody wants a dessert, go ahead and get yourself some dessert, and meanwhile I'll get the next video and the next speaker prepared. Individuals who have had literary cafes with the American Freedom Alliance, myself, Trevor Loudon, and John Hancock. So the American Freedom Alliance is well represented. It's an organization out of the Los Angeles area, and in fact, three of us will be at an event tomorrow with the American Freedom Alliance. If you want to learn more, look them up online, American Freedom Alliance. Great work the organization is doing. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of Avi Davis. Avi Davis was a very dear friend, passed away late last year, and he will be missed. All right, Alan Myers is our next speaker, and Alan, it's all yours.
How's that? Okay. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'm going to start off and thank Doug Gibbs. Doug, pay attention. Thank you. I'm not here without him. None of us are probably here without him. And this, you just look around. Look at how many people are in this room who are looking for information, who are looking to become informed, becoming active. Please, everyone, round of applause for Doug Gibbs. I'm going to start off with a quote. Mark Twain was quoted as saying, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled." Tonight, I'm here to begin the discussion of how we have all been so fooled. If you heard the video, I'm not going to get into my background other than I'm a CPA and I happen to be a forensic accountant, and I'll get to how that has helped me understand the Fed. When I say Fed, I mean the Federal Reserve System, not the national government. I could title this speech, "The Fed is a Fraud." I could title this speech, "The Lies, the Failures, and Fraud of the Fed." Either way, we're going to get to it. Some of the lies related to the Fed include, well, before we get to the lies, let's talk about what the Fed is, because a lot of people don't fully understand it. The Fed is 12 regional, independent, privately owned banking corporations, plus the Board of Governors. That's it. That is the nature of the Fed. The thing about each bank is regional, it's independent, it's privately owned. Who owns it? Who are the stockholders? The stockholders are the banks that the Fed is supposed to monitor and regulate. They're the stockholders. Now we know in this country that all corporations operate for one benefit and one benefit only, and that is the owners. They don't operate for the people they serve. They don't operate for the community. So each regional bank is operating for the benefit of its owners, and its owners are the ones that's supposed to regulate and monitor. This is not good. Another thing about the shareholders, actually in the law, it's stockholders. And the law I'm talking about is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Page 8, Section 7, under dividends. This is where I first found out about it. I didn't know what I was looking for, and this is the nature of forensic accounting. When you get into something, you don't always know what you're looking for, but you sure know it when you find it. And in that section under dividends, you find out that the stockholders of the Fed get a 6% dividend every year. It's by law. Now, does that sound like a public institution to you? It doesn't sound public to me. The big lie is that the Fed is public or quasi-public. I make the argument that it's totally private. And I'm going to go through some of the basics behind what I believe makes the Fed a totally private monetary system. There's the dividends to the stockholders. There's the... How many times has the Fed honored a Freedom of Information Request Act? The Dr. Pauls, congressman and senator, they want to audit the Fed. And when they say audit, they don't mean in an accounting sense, because each Federal Reserve Bank and the Board of Governors, their financial statements are audited every year by one of the national accounting firms. They want to do an operational audit. And I applaud their work, I applaud their interest and their intent, but I believe that all you need to know is the publicly available information about the Fed to know that it's wrong, it's bad, and it's a monetary system that needs to be replaced. They don't allow them to be audited. They don't honor any Freedom of Information Request Act. But one of the biggest things about the Fed is they're part of a multi-employer retirement system. There's 14 employers in the retirement system. It's the 12 Fed banks, the Board of Governors, and the plan administrator. This is a totally closed retirement system. All or substantially all the employees of all the Fed banks, the Board of Governors, and the retirement system belong to this, or participate in the system. How many public agencies have a private retirement system? I would say none. The other oddity about reading the actual law is that I found out that unlike any other group or corporation out there, the Federal Reserve is obligated to pay, and it pays every year, a franchise tax to the national government. Now, if everybody in California knows, a franchise tax is for the pleasure and privilege of doing business. What amazed me when I looked at the financial statements of the Fed banks, which you can find on the web, PDF, they get down to a number called net income before distribution. There's 3 items of distribution. When they get done with that, it goes to 0. You got the 6% dividend. You have another, and that's 6% based on capital. You got another amount that goes to reserves, and the lion's share of the money goes to the U.S. Treasury. But on the financials, they don't say franchise tax the way they describe it in the law. They used to call it interest on Federal Reserve notes. Well, that's pretty crazy. Federal Reserve notes are owned by the Fed. Why would they ever pay interest on something they own, that they created? Now they call it transfers to the U.S. Treasury. They actually avoid saying what it is. Do you think the Department of Defense pays a franchise tax? I don't think so. This entity is totally private. It controls our monetary system. Some of the big failures out of this system, and there's many, one of them is, hold on, need my example. We're all familiar with this. How many times have you heard that the Fed or the national government is printing too much of these? All the time. This is printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing is a bureau of the U.S. Treasury. They print this on demand for the Fed. The Fed is charged a per note charge. Back in 2006, 2008, it was 6.4 cents a note. Now, depending on the print run, it's 8 to 10 cents a note. It's charged. When this paper with green ink leaves the bureau and winds up in the vault of a Fed bank, is it money? No. Is it inventory? No. It's nothing more than a printing expense on the books of the Fed. It's right up there with office supplies. When the bank, and the only reason a commercial bank wants any of this is because we want it. If a bank could operate completely without having any physical money, they'd do it. When they request coin or paper, is it money in the hands of a bank, whether it's in their vault or teller drawers? No. It's that portion of their reserves in physical form. Literally, commercial banks have no money of their own. This is by definition, by the Fed and the economic definition of what money really is. And it's very important, and I'm going to take a moment to explain this, it's very important to understand what money is so you can understand what money isn't. Money is cash and coin in circulation, and all the electronic. This is M1. M1 is the smallest of supplies. I got 5 minutes. M1 is cash and coin in circulation, and all the digits and all the checking accounts. All the cash and coin held by a bank, all the cash and coin held by the U.S. Treasury, all the cash and coin held by Fed banks, not money. In fact, the Fed has no money. Zero money. In fact, if you can go to the Financial Accounting Manual, which is the audit manual of the Fed. The Fed doesn't even have, not one bank has even a bank account. They have no bank accounts, they have no money, they don't need them because they create reserves. The big problem with our money from debt system is banks create money by making journal entries. Back in the day, it was pencil on paper. Now it's fingertips on a keyboard. And they do this by making loans. And when they make a loan and add the digits to a checking account, they create a receivable called loan receivable. Only problem with that is the total loan amount, principal and interest owed, is greater than the amount of money they added to the money supply, which means we're short. And because the banks create the money, our national government can only do one of three things. I used to say just borrow or tax. An economic friend of mine added the third. It's called extortion. Fines, fees, interest, penalties. Bottom line is, our government cannot fund itself under the current monetary system. It either taxes us or borrows. And there's a big problem with the borrowing. Everybody's heard of Bernie Madoff? He's doing 150 years for pleading guilty to multiple felonies related to running the world's largest private Ponzi scheme. And the reason it was a Ponzi is not because he tried really hard and failed, it's because he had no profit operation. He never did anything. Tell me the profit-making operation that our national government is in. Doesn't have one. This makes the national government debt the world's largest public Ponzi scheme. This has got to stop. I'm going to wind up with a couple of things. Number one, the call to action. I could go on and on. This is a multi-hour topic. The bottom line is, we are the citizen owners of this country. This is our country. The people in D.C. are elected employees. And what kind of business runs well when the employees tell the owners what to do? Doesn't work. The problem, and when I say this, when I say we, I'm throwing me into, we're the problem. We're not telling our employees what to do. This needs to change now. How do you fix the monetary system? You can't fix it. It has to be replaced. How do you replace the Fed? It's just laws on the books. They can be repealed. We got to get Congress to act. And I know, okay, how are we going to do that? We have to start doing our job, people. We have to tell the elected employees in D.C. to repeal the Federal Reserve Act and all their amendments. We do it with emails, we do it with phone calls, and we do it every day until it gets done. And if they don't do it, they're going to know one thing. They're going to get fired. Either they're not going to get rehired or they're going to get recalled. The other thing that you can do at a local level is get people in state and county and city. You ask them, where are they on this issue and what are they doing to get the laws repealed? There is a great monetary system waiting to replace this. And when it is put into effect, two things go away. Really good things. The national government will have no need to tax, and the national government will have no need to borrow. This is a much longer conversation. You have to wait till next time. I'm going to close with this. And I think this is a really important quote for the time. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. George Orwell. What is going on in your country, in your life, when being truthful, presenting facts, is a revolutionary act? It's a scary time. And I will also close with something from Thomas Jefferson, one of my favorite patriots, and I've found that if I ever need a quote, all I need to do is look up Thomas Jefferson. Also on topic, he said, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. I think we've got some injustice in our laws, and our duty is clear. It can be done by everyone. You tell your family, you tell your friends, you tell your co-workers, you tell your neighbors, you tell somebody standing next to you in the grocery store. If you don't like what's going on, step up and get involved. And I want to thank everybody here tonight for being here. Really enjoyed it. Have a great night.
Lou Overman. Yeah. And just to give you a brief rundown, and we hope that as we go down the line, the Constitution Association and the Convention of States will be partners. Lou?